We've had one problem.
What is that problem?
That problem is Valeant.
$4 billion of client money gone for a company that bought companies just to raise drug prices.
Sewer was too light a word for the behavior of this company.
Wall Street loved it, billionaires backed it, and for 7 years the stock did nothing but climb. Until it all collapsed.
Could this be the pharmaceutical Enron?
Mike Pearson. He wasn't a scientist or a doctor, and he didn't invent drugs. He grew up in London, Ontario, Canada. Not really a glamorous origin story for the man who'd nearly break the American healthcare system. He spent 23 years at McKinsey running their global pharmaceutical practice. He was sharp and relentless. What he focused on obsessively was R&D, the expensive research and development process of inventing new drugs. And he believed that pharma wasted money on it. He thought he could fix that. In 2008, he became CEO of Valeant, then a middling drug company with a forgettable brand and a stock price below $15. His first move? Slash R&D to 3% of revenue. Now, traditional pharma spends around 15 to 20%, but you see, for Pearson, why spend money trying to create new drugs or improve them when you can just buy the company, fire the scientists, and raise the prices? That was his business model. Under Pearson, revenue jumped from $757 million to $8 billion, and the stock went from $15 a share to over $260 a share. Wall Street looked at those numbers and fell completely in love. Valeant was the hot stock, and everyone on Wall Street wanted to get in bed with them. But a small group of Wall Street outsiders saw something else: fraud. Allergan. You probably never heard of them, but you definitely heard of what they invented: Botox. They were everything Valeant wasn't: a respectable brand, backed by real science, and research and development. And Pearson wanted them bad. Problem though? Valeant didn't have the money, so they called in Bill Ackman, the tall, silver-haired, Harvard-polished, always magazine-ready billionaire hedge fund manager. On the other hand, Pearson was overweight and frumpy. Oh, and legendarily cheap. So cheap that when Ackman visited Valeant's New Jersey office to prep the announcement and asked for a Chipotle burrito instead of the lunch being served, Pearson's assistant obliged. And then Pearson walked in and asked Ackman for $20. Ackman later told that story publicly as proof of Pearson's, quote, extreme culture of cost discipline. But Ackman was in love with Pearson and his business strategy of price gouging. So he set out to help Pearson acquire Allergan.
Our job, mine and Ari's job is to create value for our shareholders.
I found the first pharmaceutical CEO that I could think about investing in this business.
Ackman quietly bought a 9.7% stake in Allergan. The goal was to use his near 10% ownership of the company to pressure shareholders into selling to Pearson.
Top Gun activist Bill Ackman teaming up with Valeant, Canadian drug company, to bid for the Botox maker Allergan.
Many assumed insider trading. Ackman's lawyers said, technically it's all legal. So Ackman and Pearson took their show on the road, smearing Allergan and the leadership and alleging they were so incompetent as a company that they weren't providing any shareholder value. Translation: Allergan has a lot of products they're selling at affordable prices that we want to buy and jack up on the customer.
What's going on in Allergan, I think, is unprecedented. It's completely inappropriate, possibly illegal.
Having Bill out there in the public, he doesn't give up. We don't give up either. So I think that helps.
But Allergan's CEO, David Pyatt, hated Ackman and Pearson and refused to sell the company to them, and compared their moves as if it were Pearl Harbor. Allergan eventually sold to activists for a higher price. Valeant lost. Ackman was angry, even though he made money from that deal considering he owned about 10% of the company. But he was angry he didn't get his way. Now, had he taken his money and walked away, he would have done just fine. But instead, he doubled down. Took the money he made on the Allergan profits and poured them into Valeant. About $4 billion of client money, by the way. Not his first rodeo either. His debut fund, Gotham Partners, operated the same way, doubling down on big, questionable bets until it blows up. He didn't learn, or didn't care. His massive ego wouldn't let it. One critic once described Ackman as being born without the gene that perceives and measures risk, and said that Ackman viewed people almost like a subspecies. Philidor looked like an ordinary pharmacy. Mail order prescriptions, low copays, 3 months of medication on your doorstep. It looked like a strip mall pharmacy with office chairs and fluorescent lights. Beige walls, low cubicles, the kind of place that processes prescriptions and goes home at 5. Nothing about it said, this place is helping power a $90 billion company. But here's how things actually played out. Step 1, Valeant bought an old drug. Step 2, Valeant raised the price. Step 3, Philidor made sure insurers paid for it. But there was a problem with step 3, insurance companies. For example, Jublia, a toenail fungus cream. Valeant jacked up the cost nearly $1,000 per prescription. Now obviously a customer would never pay $1,000 for some toenail fungus cream. These medicines weren't exactly life-threatening. But Philidor wasn't only counting on patients. They were also going after insurers, and the insurance companies would push back. They'd deny the claim, they'd tell the patient to use a cheaper generic instead. Valeant needed something to deal with that. A fixer. Someone to run interference between them and the insurers. That's what Philidor was. So Philidor picks up the phone. First, they resubmit the claim. Insurers say no again. Philidor adjusts the billing code and tries a different angle. Still no? They switch it through a different pharmacy name. Still blocked? They route it through an entirely different pharmacy. One of the dozens they had registered across the country, with a different address, a different name, a fresh slate with the insurer. A researcher going through the list noticed something strange about the names. Valeant employees worked inside Philidor's offices under fake names. They even had names like Peter Parker and Jack Reacher. And they were relentless, almost beating down insurance companies into submission. One former Philidor employee described the place as a call center wired for combat. Supervisors walked the floor telling reps to find a way whenever an insurer said no. Find a way meant don't take no for an answer. Meanwhile, Valeant had paid $100 million for the option to buy Philidor outright. They looked like separate companies, but in reality, money flowed directly from Philidor to Valeant. Investors were never clearly told how integrated the two companies were.
Listen, these are allegations, of course, and oftentimes you don't want to I can't be in a position to necessarily tell you whether they are true or not, but they're focused on a drug called Philidor.
The investigations loomed, but Valeant didn't think it could stop them, so they went on another shopping spree, but the deals got bigger and riskier.
You came out of the Allergan fight a loser, but there are those who say ultimately this company is only built to acquire.
I don't think we were a loser. I think we were disciplined.
A lot of analysts are expecting some more M&A. I mean, that's your business model. Can we expect more big M&A from you guys?
We will absolutely start getting back in M&A.
Valeant is now buying bankrupt cancer vaccine maker Dendreon.
It is the deal of the day, if not one of the biggest deals of the year. Valeant agreeing to buy Salix Pharmaceuticals for hundreds. You're never going to stop doing deals, are you?
Probably not. Life will get boring.
It seemed like nothing was going to stop Valeant, until a group of nosy Wall Street outsiders started to dig. A group of Wall Street vigilante short sellers who didn't know each other all smelled something rotten with Valeant. And they ran the numbers. Valeant was valued at 10 times sales. Now to have that kind of value, you better be creating the next revolutionary innovation. And Valeant wasn't. All they did was just squeeze every penny out of the drugs they just bought. So then they dug into Philidor. Unusual pharmacy behavior, references to entities that didn't quite line up, fake names. Valeant insisted Philidor didn't matter. Hey, nothing to see here, folks. But there was a lot to see, and a lot for investigators and the short sellers to dig into. Everything broke when a story about a pharmacy called RNO received a bizarre $69 million invoice from Valeant. RNO connected to Philidor, Philidor connected to Valeant, and the media ran with it.
So Valeant has been an over-discussed company on Wall Street for the past year and a half. From the analyst community, obviously it's a hedge fund darling. There's not one person who's even heard about Philidor until 3 days ago. And now we not only hear about it, but they have an ownership structure. They don't own them, but they consolidate their financials underneath them. Now we'll move to the second part, which is actually even more extraordinary. Why Philidor would have the same exact fax number and the same contact information as one of the pharmacies they supply to. which was the subject of this $69 million invoice. None of it makes sense.
Business Insider published leaked internal documents. Reporters found Valeant email addresses inside Philidor, Valeant executives sitting in Philidor meetings. Inside Philidor, employees learned about the scandal from Twitter before management spoke. Some even walked into work and sensed panic. Closed doors, hushed conversations, shredders running. They thought they worked for a scrappy little pharmacy startup, so the Department of Justice stepped in, and federal prosecutors dropped the hammer.
We allege fraud that we unearthed involving Valeant and a company named Philidor, but they were, in fact, we allege, partners in crime.
Prosecutors found $10 million of kickbacks between a Valeant executive and the CEO of Philidor. A Manhattan jury eventually convicted them, and they both received about 1 year in prison. By this point, it got a little too hot for Valeant, so they cut ties with Philidor.
Shares of Valeant Pharmaceuticals under pressure today after the company cut ties with the specialty pharmacy Philidor. It distributed some of Valeant's prescriptions. Yesterday, pharmacy benefits managers CVS Health, Express Scripts, and a unit of United Health Group all ended their relationships with Philidor.
And after losing those contracts, there was nothing left. Philidor shut down. With the scandal, Pearson and Ackman went into full damage control.
Well, there's lots of allegations that have been made, but nothing has been proven yet.
Notice how he sidestepped and didn't really answer the question. Their 2 conference calls didn't help either. Pearson complained and sounded defensive. Ackman ran his own call and he sounded nervous and out of touch. But his ego and greed was still more powerful than the obvious facts before him. When he believes he's right, he takes it to the end of the earth, and he takes your money with him.
It's the single best time in my career that I've seen to invest.
To invest money. There's more value out there than you could ever imagine.
Instead of cutting ties with Valeant, even after the allegations of fraud, the schemes, and the price extortion, he invests another $1 billion, of client money of course, into Valeant. Because for a guy like Ackman, only 2 things are true. He can't ever be wrong, and it's always money above all else. And just when things couldn't get worse, Mike Pearson was taking medical leave at the worst possible moment. He was hospitalized with severe pneumonia. Valeant had built a company that depended on one man's control, and suddenly, that man was gone. For 6 weeks, Valeant drifted around. There was no leadership or strategy. Reporters dug deeper and short sellers piled on. 2 weeks after returning from medical leave, Pearson stepped onto a conference stage looking thinner, weaker, and visibly rattled. He admitted multiple federal investigations were underway. The notoriously cheap Pearson was so desperate that he sent a memo assuring staff they weren't going bankrupt and offered $100,000 retention bonuses. That didn't help. The rats were fleeing the sinking ship.
Valeant, let's take a little look at the stock, but I'm not sure if it has continued to move down or stabilized in any way. Where is it now? No, now it's in a complete free fall.
This is about $18 billion of wealth that has been destroyed.
Snowball that just keeps getting bigger and bigger for Valeant. First, it was on
Stock has since lost $22 billion.
The board at Valeant started to buckle. Pearson, who was able to price gouge their drugs to get the stock from $15 to $260 a share, still had allies on the board. But one major ally started to turn against him.
We missed that someone with a superb track record of making acquisitions could do something, Mike Pearson went crazy, in my opinion. And
Ackman maneuvered behind his back, got the board to fire him, and then acted as shadow CEO. The man who called Pearson a once-in-a-generation genius fired him over the phone after being sick. Irony, right? But that wouldn't be it for Pearson, because the US government finally had enough and would soon have a chat with both he and Ackman. Cyprine and cupramine were developed in the 1950s by British pharmacist Dr. John Walsh. Life-saving drugs for Wilson's disease. Merck once sold them for roughly $1 a pill. They were never blockbusters, they never really were meant to be, they were just medicine. Wilson's disease patients don't have alternatives. Stop the medication, and copper builds up in your organs until they fail. There is no shopping around, there is no wait for a coupon. After a chain of sales, Valeant acquired them, and they knew exactly what they had. Typically, a company makes money and grows their business by selling a product and getting new customers. The problem for Pearson, Ackman, and Valeant is that not many people have Wilson's disease. If they can't infect people and grow their total addressable market, then how can they make more money? Easy, by jacking up the price. Pearson's logic was simple. Patients have no choice. Pay or die.
Okay, that's not illegal, though.
No, it's not illegal, but I don't think it's wise when you take somebody that has a life-saving drug and you buy it and then you quintuple the price or something of the sort.
Between 2015 and 2019, Valeant increased the monthly price of Cyprine from $650 to $21,000, which meant you could be paying almost $300,000 a year for medicine you had no choice but to take. And in those same 5 years, their stock value went from $2.3 billion to $78 billion. Talk about shareholder value. And the creator of that medicine, Dr. Walsh, well, he had this to say.
The way they're charging for it now is absolutely immoral. There's no other word for it. It is totally immoral. It is business at its worst.
Other price hikes included cupramine, which rose more than 5,000% over a decade. A diabetes drug they owned, Glumetza, jumped from $500 to $10,000 a month. A heart drug, Isupril, went from $215 to $1,346 per vial. Another, Nitropress, went from $257 to $805. These weren't medicines they created either. Pearson, again, really didn't believe in R&D. They bought the companies that made these drugs, then jacked up the prices on patients. But you can't exactly do all that without facing some tough questions. A month after being fired, Pearson was called in with Ackman to testify before Congress.
The average price of your top 30 products is up 78% over last year. Find me one drug that Valeant didn't raise the price on.
I don't know offhand the price. I don't have the price
Mr.
list.
Pearson, one drug that you didn't raise the price on after you acquired it.
Not in the United States.
Translation, we only jack up prices where the system lets us. Which is why one patient emailed Bill Ackman like he was tech support for staying alive.
Mr. Ackman, on exhibit number 81 is an email you received in January of 2015 from a man by the name of Drew Katz. He had contacted you.
Yes.
About the incredible problem and the fact that death could result if people couldn't get this drug.
Absolutely.
And the incredible increase in price.
Yes.
You called Mr. Pearson.
I sent him an email.
And it's my understanding from you talking to the committee that he assured you that anybody who needed help could get it. Did you follow up to see what they'd done about the price of this drug?
No, I took him at his word.
Never followed up, never checked on the man whose life depended on a drug his investment was pricing into oblivion. In fact, Ackman told the Senate he would move to get the company to lower the cost of Cyprine.
I texted our board chair while I was listening to the hearing and suggested we have a board call tomorrow to discuss the drugs that are the subject of today's hearing. And my recommendation is going to be we reduce the prices of those drugs.
Maybe he made that recommendation, but Ackman had a lot of power with the company, so why just make a recommendation when you can just make it happen? Either way, a year passed and the price stayed the same. Eventually, a generic finally arrived in 2018. It still cost tens of thousands a year, nearly 28 times more than Cyprine had cost years earlier. The Valeant name was so radioactive, by the way, their own leaders used that term, so to try to hide from it, they rebranded as Bausch Health. After all the investigations and Senate hearings, the stock fell over 90%. The SEC charged Valeant in 2020 and fined them $45 million for improper accounting tied to Philidor. Ackman exited after his Pershing Square funds lost roughly $4 billion. Again, most of it was not his money, but his client money. Doesn't hurt as much when you gamble away other people's money. He wrote a 13-page letter, and by the way, this man also loves his long-winded Twitter posts. He called the Valeant bet deeply and profoundly regrettable. But was it regrettable because he lost money and looked foolish, or because of the pain it caused on people with medical conditions? You be the judge of that. As for Pearson, well, he walked away with about $12 million in severance. Must be nice. Regular people get a "we wish you the best in your future endeavors" if they're lucky. He got a "here's generational wealth for the inconvenience." But I guess to be fair, he did create a lot of shareholder value. Well, by screwing over sick people though. But still, shareholder value.
Our job is to create shareholder value.
And so people shouldn't be afraid of anything that happens that helps them create shareholder value.
Then he actually sued the company for additional shares he claimed were owed, more than $30 million worth. A senator once asked how much of what Valeant did was illegal. Technically, not much. A lot of what they did turned out to be allowed by the system. Almost no one at the top went to prison. The only convictions were for a Philidor kickback scheme, not the price hikes. Because when you have a system that rewards greed over care, what's good for investors over what's good for people, then what exactly do you think people who look at a dying patient and see pricing power are going to do? The system allowed it, and the market just rewarded it.